Hey beautiful people, thank you again for joining me under the palm. If you're new here, my name is Deborah and I make videos on Bible, health, and home with a focus on eschatology. If that sounds good to you, please subscribe to the channel. Now let's get into the video. So today I wanted to talk about whether the world is going to just get worse and worse prior to Jesus's return, or is there going to be a great revival, tons of prosperity, just a great time for Christianity and kind of rule the world for a bit. So I want to get into that and see if that's even a biblical concept. So the first verse I want to talk about is 2 Timothy 3:13, where it talks about the world waxing worse and worse. It says, "But evil men and impostors will grow worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived." So we see here they're going to get worse as time goes on. So you could say, well, yeah, there could be revivals in there and prosperity, ruling the world, party time. But overall, it will be a downward trajectory motion. Even if it goes up and down, kind of ebbs and flows, the overall trajectory, it says, if we read the Bible, that it will go in a downward spiral. So we also see in 2 Timothy 3 that it says, "But know this, that in the last days perilous times will come. For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemous, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy." So we do know that the world is going to look pretty bad. Now you could say, but that doesn't mean there's not going to be huge revivals and there's not going to be basically times of Christians just having great gains. So let me just go a little further, and I do have some notes, so let's get into that. First of all, let's just talk about what is a revival. A revival is a spiritual awakening in which a church or community is brought out of a state of dormancy or stagnation, resulting in changed lives and a renewed pursuit of personal righteousness. In one sense, revival can only happen among believers, since it is a restoration to life. In common usage, however, the word revival often refers to any large-scale response to evangelism in which new converts are made. Does the Bible contain any prophecies about a worldwide revival breaking out? So let's go to the Bible and see what it says. So in Matthew 24:14, Jesus speaks of the gospel being preached to the whole world, and then the end will come. Jesus does not indicate what the response to the preaching will be. But just a few verses earlier, he said, "At that time, many will turn away from the faith, and many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase in wickedness, the love of most will grow cold." That's Matthew 24:10-12. Jesus is basically saying here the gospel will be preached to the whole world, but he does not indicate the response the world will have. He doesn't say anything about them accepting and there being a huge revival. But if we look just a few verses earlier, he says many will turn from the faith. So that's kind of the opposite of a revival in the end days. So the gospel will go out, but many will turn from the faith. So also elsewhere, Jesus asks rhetorically, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? And that's in Luke 18:8. So he makes it seem like there's going to be a lack of faith. People will be turning from the faith. At this point, we're not seeing any indication of a great revival prior to the Great Tribulation or prior to the millennial reign. Now, I just want to point out, in contrast to how the world will be in the end times, lover of themselves, like kind of selfie nation, and that's what we see now. Like the fact that that word even exists shows that that's what state the world is in. The Bible says in Matthew 22:36-40, it says, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." So in contrast to how the world will look, we're told that instead of loving ourselves, having self-love, focusing on self, we're to love others and love God first and foremost. Nowhere does it say that you, number one, should be loving yourself, which is very interesting because it's literally the opposite of the direction of the world. Now, I want to point out that the church has had periods of revival since Jesus died and rose again. So it's had periods of great growth and periods of what seemed to be stagnation as well. So there has been those ebbs and flow, but like I said, it's in a downward trajectory. Jesus never taught about a global revival. He never said that that was going to happen before the tribulation. So I'd like to read 1 Timothy 4, 1-2, where it says, "Now the Spirit expressly says that in latter times some will depart from the faith, giving heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their own conscience seared with a hot iron." So it says in the latter times, some will depart from the faith. Instead of hearing these teachings of this great revival or these amazing happy times where Christians are going to rule the world, you hear that there are going to be times where people are leaving the faith instead of joining it. So like I said, there were points of revival throughout church history, but as you see, they're growing less and less as time goes on. This is not to put down revival. We are literally just examining the Bible to see what it says the end days are going to look like. So we can also talk about the Great Tribulation. Will there be revival there? And in the millennial reign, will there be revival there? So in the battle of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel 38 and 39, which takes place most likely in the church age, probably like right before the tribulation, or it could be in the tribulation, we could see revival for Israel in that time period. So it says, "From that day forward, the people of Israel will know that I am the Lord their God. I will pour out my spirit on the people of Israel." That's Ezekiel 39, 22 and 29. So in those days, they're going to turn back to him and he's going to pour out his spirit on them. So we see a revival with the Jewish nation, but still I have not seen anything biblically with regards to just the church in general in the latter days. So also in the tribulation, you see more of the Jews turning their hearts to the Lord. Here in Jeremiah 37, it says, "It is the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it." So it's more about them turning their hearts or being saved or coming to the Lord. And that's the Jewish nation, but not the Christian church. Now let's talk about, will there be Christians coming to the Lord? Will there be a great revival in the tribulation? So we looked at prior to the tribulation, the very last days, and we saw that it said things are going to get worse. People are going to turn from the faith. Things will be waxing worse and worse. So in Revelation 7 verse 9, it says, "After these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude which no one can number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes, with palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, saying, 'Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb.'" And in verse 13 it says, "Then one of the elders answered, saying to me, 'Who are these arrayed in white robes, and where did they come from?' Verse 14 says, "And I said to him, 'Sir, you know.' So he said to me, 'These are the ones who come out of the great tribulation and washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb.'" So as you see here, there's a great multitude that John sees in heaven all of a sudden appear, and they are coming out of the great tribulation. So clearly there is a lot of people in the great tribulation believing in Jesus. So that would be what I would call a great revival. Now, again, this is not prior to Jacob's trouble. This is during. So if you're sitting waiting for something to happen that's, this holly jolly time for Christians, unfortunately, biblically, it doesn't show that's going to happen. That doesn't mean you don't witness. That doesn't mean you don't share the gospel. It says when the gospel is shared to the ends of the earth, then he will come. So that's the goal that we do. But it does not say the response that people will have to that. Now let's talk about the millennial reign. What's going to happen there? Will there be a great revival? Will there be a turning away? What's going to happen there? So in the millennial reign, which is the 1,000 years where Christ will be able to set up his kingdom and rule on this earth, after the Great Tribulation, Jacob's trouble. I can get more into the millennial reign later, but for now, let's just talk about if there's going to be revival or turning away or what. So in Isaiah 11:9, it says, "The earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea." Also in Zechariah 14:16, it says, During that era, former enemies of the Lord will go up year after year to worship the King, the Lord Almighty, and celebrate the Festival of Tabernacles. So you see here, there's people who are going to be worshiping the Lord, and it says, knowledge of the Lord will cover the earth like waters of the sea. You see that there's just a ton of people who are at least outwardly living like they are worshiping God and coming to his festivals and doing all that stuff. So you can kind of call that a revival because the earth is basically living under their Lord's rule. But let's look at something else. You can see that even though there's this time of worship of the Lord and obeying the Lord, many will turn away. So if you read Revelation 27 and 9, that basically, I won't get into all the details, but after 1,000 years of the Lord ruling, with all his saints ruling with him in glorified bodies, the people of the earth, everyone who was left over from the tribulation, who are natural bodies and they've lived for 1,000 years, had children and all that stuff, many are going to turn away at the end. So you can read Revelation 20. They're basically going to decide not to follow Jesus at the very end. So even though it was a time where they were all worshiping God, you can see their true hearts at the very end. So, it was kind of like outwardly lip service stuff. And then when they had the chance to prove themselves, many of them turned away. So what's the conclusion? So the first point is there have been many revivals throughout the church history. There's been ebbs and flows throughout the church history, but the overall state of the world will decline prior to the tribulation. It won't be getting better. I showed biblical proof where it shows the earth will keep declining and there will be no phase of heightened revival. There may be ebbs and flows, but overall it is going to decline. And in the tribulation, there will be a great revival. So that's awesome. That's really awesome. But it isn't a great tribulation. It's under great stress and pressure. And a lot of times that's what it takes for people to trust in the Lord. And then in the millennial reign, people will be worshiping God, but their true hearts will show at the end that many actually only did it because they had to. So what's the takeaway for all of this? I would say the takeaway is that you should not have your heart set on some sort of prosperity, holly jolly, happy ruling of Christians during this time period of the church age, the age of grace before the Great Tribulation, or before the tribulation, before Jacob's trouble, the 7 years. This is not to be gloom and doom. This is just to be factual. So like I said, there are ebbs and flows. There's definitely people coming to the Lord. People are believing. We're preaching the gospel to the ends of the earth as obedient servants, but that doesn't mean that people are going to receive it. But that is our job, and that is what we're supposed to do. Again, this is not sad news. It's just reality. And another thing I think is a great takeaway is when Jesus said people will be lovers of themselves, and in Timothy that the world would be worse, and they would their characteristics would be so bad, and they would just have so much self-love. And you see all these self-help books and everything. Basically, we are to do the contrast. Just like Jesus said, we are to love others and love God and focus on others. So I think that's a big takeaway, that even though the world is going in a certain direction, a downward trajectory, we can go up and up and up with Christ. And again, look up, be encouraged, because there is a great plan that God has. So please be encouraged, because God does have good plans for us, those who trust in Him. And in the end, we are going to reign and rule with Christ for 1,000 years, and then have eternity with Him in renewed bodies, in glorified bodies, bodies like He had, and with our brothers and sisters in Christ for eternity in perfect harmony, paradise, and peace. So in the end, it will be all worth it. But right now we are in a time of trial and testing, and it is not going upwards until it goes really downwards, and then it's going to go way up forever. So I hope this was interesting to you. I hope you learned something. If you liked the video, please give it a like, and like I said, subscribe, because this is a newer channel and I'm just trying to help people, and hopefully this blesses them. So until next time, thank you again for joining me under the palm, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.